What are some of the things that get you charged up? Hello again, everyone. I'm Eli's dad with Project Eli, where we educate, lead, and inspire. And today I want to share with you an experience that I had where I learned quite a bit from a 24-year-old that taught me a little bit about getting charged up. So I'd like to invite you to join Eli and me as we go over my little experience. You know, Eli, here's what happened. I was having an issue with my phone. I plugged it in and the phone wasn't accepting a charge at all. So I knew I had to go to somebody to get it fixed because, as you know, I'm a technical ignorant, don't know how to figure much stuff out. So I went to looking for a couple of different phone stores to go to, and I'd been to a few phone stores. Here's kind of a lesson for you, for people in business. I've been to a couple of phone stores. I went to this one that's actually the closest one to my house, and the last time I was in there, the guy was not there to help me. He was there to sell me. He wanted to sell me this, he wanted to sell me that, and it's like he wasn't interested in what I wanted, he was interested in what he wanted. So I didn't go to that store. So then I went to another store. And of course online it said they opened at 10, but they didn't open until 11. Next, then I went to another store. And in this other store, the guy had like a phone outlet, and then he also had beauty supplies, believe it or not. The two of them connected, and I was getting like no attention. I was in there for 10 minutes, no one's paying attention to me. It's not like the place was mobbed with people. I said, screw it, next. So I ended up going back to the store that was closest to my house, and when I walked in, I was pleasantly surprised because the guy that had given me the business the last time, looking to sell me stuff, he wasn't the one that was there. I had been there before, and there was a young kid in there, and this young guy was, interested in helping me. Well, when I went in there, there was another young guy in there, and I don't know if it was the same guy. I don't think it was. And I walked in, and it was the morning, so it wasn't very, very crowded at all. So I go in, and I'm explaining it to this young guy. Now, keep in mind, I'm an old guy, so 24, that I found out he was 24. 24 to me is a young guy. So I'm talking to him, and I'm talking about, gee, my phone won't accept a charge. Okay, let me see it. Let's do this. Let's do that. All right, and I said, yeah, my cord's kind of disheveled, messed up. And one of the things he said is, the most important thing is you want to check the cord from the power source. So the first thing he did was plugged it into a power source. He said, your phone's working fine. So I'm guessing that it's your cord. He said, these are some things that you want to think about. First of all, are there any kinks in the line? And then he took the cord and he went like this and undid, any possible kinks. Now, why am I bringing this up? Think about your power source. All right? Don't you want to be a partner with the universe to receive input from the universe? Are there kinks in your power source? And what I mean by that is, if you don't have a singleness of purpose, if you're constantly meandering from distraction to distraction to distraction, those are the kinks that are in your power source. Another thing he said to me was, don't charge your phone all night. Don't leave the cord in all night. Only even if it's not fully charged, still don't leave it in all night. And I'm thinking to myself, you know what? There's a congruency there also. What do some people do? They have a problem, an issue, I like to call an unsolved opportunity that they're trying to solve. And they go to sleep, and their mind is just going back and forth over the issue, over the issue, over the issue. This is where your faith comes in the universal partner, in the infinite intelligence. What you have to do is you figure out where you want the outcome to be. You don't suggest, of course you've already tried several different logical outcomes. That's why it's an issue, because if you would solve this issue, you wouldn't be worrying about it at night, right? So you've tried several things, right? So now you need to look at things from a different paradigm, a different perspective. So what do? Right? When you go to sleep, you think of the final outcome and you send it off into the universe. You have a singleness of purpose. You visualize what you want to see, and then you let it go. You've got to let it go. You've got to have faith. You have to have trust in your partner. All right? The same way as you don't want to be plugged in all night with your phone, you don't want to be plugged in all night with your issue. Let it go. Let the power that's there work some magic. And then when you wake up, or you get up in the morning, or you give yourself some relaxed thinking time, hopefully there will be some intuitive thoughts, there'll be a solution, there'll be a bit of a puzzle piece there for you to put together. And it doesn't happen all the time, but it happens enough of the time where you want to have faith in the process, because we receive best when we're in a relaxed state. Now, he and I, of course, started talking a great deal because he's charging my phone and this and that. We had time, and fortunately for me, there was nobody else in the store. I mean, one person came in, he took care of them in a minute, but then he went back and forth with me. So he and I were having a real nice conversation. Like I said, he was 24 years old, and I explained to him, about what happened the last time, about the guy that was trying to sell me stuff. And he said, "Oh yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about." And I asked him how long he'd been working with the company. He said, "I've been doing this, I've been doing that, in several different places, so on and so forth." And I started talking to him about how important it is as somebody in business to understand the mindset of people in different generations. As somebody that's a baby boomer, I asked him, I said, "So what generation are you? Are you Generation X? Are you Generation Y?" He said, "I'm probably a millennial." I said, "Okay." I said it's kind of important. I said, now when you get in your car and you turn on the radio or whatever it is you listen to, what is it that you listen to?" And he said to me, "Well, I'm unusual. I don't listen to the rap music. I listen to country music." I said, "Okay, all right." And I'm thinking to myself, that's one of the times you want to turn your quantity time into quality time. I didn't go through any preaching or anything like that. And he and I, we're talking, and I mentioned to him, I said, "Hey, do you want to see something neat?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Are you connected to the internet?" He says, "Yeah." I said, "All right, go to YouTube." All right, so he went to YouTube, and I said, "Now, in the search bar, type in Project Eli." And he typed in Project Eli, and I said, "Scroll down a little bit." I said, "You see anybody familiar there?" And he goes, "That's you." And I said, "Yeah, I have my own channel." I said, "It's about personal development, goal setting, positive mental attitude, sales, marketing, owner's manual for your brain." I mean, gave him a brief summary of what it was. And so he said, "You know what?" He said, "I have a question for you." He said, "This came up with me, and I have a friend." He said, "I personally don't have any children myself, but one of my friends has, he's a little older than I am, and he's got 2 kids. One's an 8-year-old and the other is 3. And so occasionally they call upon me to babysit. So I'm there, I'm babysitting, and the 8-year-old boy comes up to me and asks me, "Why do people die? What happens with death?" And I got, and the 24-year-old kid is kind of flustered, and he's saying, my first thought was, that's not something that I want to answer for him. That's something that his dad should answer. I mean, I'm babysitting him. I mean, I'm somewhat of his uncle, all right, but that's something that his dad should answer for him." So he kind of put it off, and then he waited until his friend came home, and he explained to his friend what the situation was. And so the dad started explaining, but he wasn't doing a very good job, and he kind of looked over to my 24-year-old friend here and said, "Can you help me out a little bit?" And so they started to explain. The dad was first explaining that when life is very, very fragile, and when because life is fragile, you can go at any time. And the way he explained it, the little boy started crying and breaking down and didn't understand, and who knows what was going through his mind, whether that he would die or his dad would die or his mom would die or whatever. And so he was very upset. So then the 24-year-old turns to me and says, we ran into that kind of a scenario. He said, how would you have answered that question? And, well, being the big shot that I am, I said, well, here's the way that I would have done it. And I started to answer the question, and just then, fortunately for me, 2 or 3 people came in, and he was the only one behind the counter, so he had to serve them. So I gave him like a 1-sentence answer, which was not even mediocre, and shook his hand, thanked him for his time, and then I left. But after I left, I was thinking about, how do you answer that question? What do you say to an 8-year-old when they ask a question about, what is death, where do people go, so on and so forth? And, I thought about one of the things that one of my mentors had said, Bob Anderson, all right? And he always say to me, when talking about people in the workplace, he would say there's 3 sides to the balance sheet. There's the personal side, there's the spiritual side, and there's the financial side, right? The business side of the balance sheet. He said, so when you're talking with people, they're not equal. I mean, some people are putting 80% into the spiritual side, or 70% into the business side, or whatever. I mean, it's not always an equal distribution. But remember that there are 3 sides to the balance sheet when you're talking with people. And when you get to know them as people, keep that in mind and explain things to them that way. Well, I was thinking along the same lines with this little 8-year-old boy, that maybe the right way to handle it was, there's 3 parts to life. There's the spiritual part, there's the intellectual part, and there's the physical part. And of course, you're talking to an 8-year-old, so you have to really, mature it down a lot. The spiritual part is, even at 8 years old, most children have been exposed to religion, to church, to what people believe. And you say, well, that's what we call the spiritual part of life. Then you have the intellectual part of life. And the intellectual part, my 8-year-old son, is you've learned a lot, let's just say in the last year. I mean, you know a lot more than, you were where your 3-year-old sister is at one point. That's how much you know. Think of how much you know now. Intellectual means how much you've learned, how much smarter you are than you were before. And then there's the physical part. And the physical part is things that you can do. Now, you just watch your sister, she's 3 years old, she's walking now, but you remember when all she was doing was crawling. Well, you went through the same thing. And so physical means the things that you can do, your capabilities, the abilities that you have to do things with your hands, with your feet, so on and so forth. And those are improving every day for you too, aren't they? All the time. So keep in mind that these are the 3 things that make up a person: the spiritual, the intellectual, and the physical. And they're all somewhat connected. And what happens is that sometimes when people start to get very old, the intellectual part will start to decrease. When you're very young, like you are, the intellectual part starts to increase. The physical part, when you're very young, increases. And as you get very old, the physical part starts to decrease. But the spiritual part remains the one constant that puts everything together. And what happens is that even when the intellectual part, the thinking part, and the physical part deteriorate, that spiritual part will continue on and on and on. So sometimes when people do die, when they're no longer able to perform the thinking part or the physical part, they still live on with the spiritual part. So it's all tied together. And I know this is big boy stuff for you, but you did ask the question, and I want to encourage you to continue to ask me questions all the time. So that question was in my mind all day long. How do you answer that question to an 8-year-old? And that was the best that I could come up with. And because I showed this young man my channel, and I had a major weapon with me, and I forced him to subscribe, I hope that he will be watching this, and I hope that this helps you, Eli, and other folks that are out there as well. So the main points here are your connection to power. Is your line kinked? Are you leaving your power source on all night? You have to relax, otherwise you're not going to have the input from the infinite mind. And of course, the 3 sides of the balance sheet: the personal, the spiritual, and the business side of the balance sheet. Now, let's talk a little bit about the quote for the day, which comes from John F. Kennedy. And it is, leadership and learning are indispensable to each other. Once again, that's a quote from John F. Kennedy, and I give you that quote today because here I am going in to get my phone fixed, and what did this 24-year-old young man teach me? Quite a bit. So keep your ears perked, always be in a position to learn, and because we will never end a meeting on a philosophical note, let's get out there and charge! And not just your phone. I'm Eli's dad.